Hi again. My name is Mary Beth Nelson, and I am so happy, as always, to see how well attended our events are. On behalf of High Point Regional, Premier Imaging, and Cornerstone Healthcare, we hope that you find our Lunch and Learn programs interesting. Please share the good word with your friends, family, and coworkers. This is one of the ways that we try to give back to the community, and we're always so happy to see how well received our events are. I'm not sure if I have every one of your email addresses, but if you would like to share your email address with me, I'll be glad to put you on our distribution list so you can learn about our upcoming events such as these. I'm happy to announce that one of our sponsors today is Premier Imaging, and Sherry Nance, the director of that program, is going to say just a few words. And those are her employees right here down at the end that gave her a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. We're so glad to have you, and we're so glad to be a sponsor along with High Point Regional and Cornerstone. And normally we don't have to stress at the stress, talks, but wanted to make sure you guys saw our table. And I wanted just to be real brief about what now we offer at Premier Imaging. It's mammography and ultrasound, bone density, CT, MRI, and X-ray. We also do for corporate events, we have mam and glams. And so it's kind of a fun way to go have your screening mammogram and a kind of a team building event. It can be that as well, where you come with your corporation and we get Mary Beth and your human resources department together to plan this. And we have all kinds of things in addition to the mammogram, which is a massage and a bone density health screening. We have refreshments and makeovers, long stem roses, yes, a massage, and all kinds of things. So you guys just talk to us about that if you like. Make sure you grab something off the table, and welcome and enjoy the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sherry, and thank you for bringing the projector that worked today. Yay! Thanks again. I just want to get down to our topic here because I know that's why you're here, and I want to thank you all again really for your patience with our AV problems, but they will be fixed, and we are going to do this every month. Next month we're going to talk about cardiology, and it will be 4 weeks from today, and we'll have the information on our Cornerstone website, and also the presentation that you're seeing today that you're not seeing as well as you normally would, we're going to put on our website as well, cornerstonehealth.com. We'll have it on the home page, and you can download it and review it there. Dr. Ellen Nicola was awarded her undergraduate degree from the Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where she graduated with cum laude honors. She earned her PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Nicola has over 18 years postdoctoral experience serving children, adolescents, and adults in public and private organizations in Forsyth County as a psychologist, quality system manager, and clinical director. And I will tell you that we are very honored and privileged to have her speaking with us today. She's a very busy lady, and she's a very prestigious person in our psych community, and I'm going to just turn it over to her.
I want to thank everyone for coming today and your patience. And it's so great to see so many here today because this topic does apply to everyone, and couldn't we all use some help and improvement, even if you have some good coping skills, which we all do because we wouldn't make it to this point if we didn't have some coping skills. There's more to be learned. It's no coincidence that Pam planned this topic at this point in the new year, 3 weeks into the new year, because many folks probably set resolutions that they've fallen off the wagon from or relapsed. And if you're not one of those people and you're still going strong, terrific. But know that half of the 40% of Americans who set New Year's resolutions have already relapsed within the first 21 days. So you're not alone if you're feeling discouraged, and hopefully you can get some inspiration from today's talk. Today we're going to be touching not only on changing specific behaviors, but on daily stress management. So we'll be talking about bad habits in particular, but overall the things that we need to practice day in, day out, because there's not a day without stress. We're still on that last slide, sorry. Okay. The key to productivity and good health is to create balance in our life. We may not always feel like we're keeping the teeter-totter on even keel, but that might be the ultimate idealistic goal, is to balance the demands in our lives so we don't get overwhelmed, so we feel like we can keep going. When you feel out of balance, that's a state of distress. There's such a thing as good stress and bad stress. And so when we're feeling stressed out, we call that distress or disequilibrium, where the tipping the scales in the wrong direction. Stress is an inevitable part of life. We all experience it. It's not completely avoidable, and we wouldn't want it to be, because stress is our opportunity to challenge ourselves and grow. So if you can look at it as some stress is good, and some stressful situations are really positive events, they just come with stress anyway, like a marriage or a new job. Those are stressful, but we wouldn't want to have life without those good experiences. It's just how you handle them. Just to give a simple definition of stress, it's any action or situation that places physical or psychological demands on a person. So a lot qualifies as potentially stressful. All right, next slide, please. And I also wanted to say that if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask the questions, but I'll be sure that we stop at enough time to have questions at the end also. All right, so here's a list of the top 10 stressful life events. This is not a list that I made up. There's a longer, more inclusive list that's been around for years, and the original version of this has ratings with each stressful event. So I just pulled the top 10. And just because this is maybe universally the most stressful top events doesn't mean that it's the top 10 on your list. I would hope not. That not only is each one of these individually very stressful, but if any of you have more than one at a time, whether it's on this list or not, the effects of cumulative stress often results in having symptoms and problems and issues. Notice that 5 out of these top 10, if you can see them all, relate to marriage. So what does that mean? They say that marriage is supposed to be a support. Married people live longer, but yet there's 5 on the top 10 list that are about death of a spouse, divorce, marital separation. And the only positive events on this top 10, but they qualify as being that stressful, are marriage and retirement. Now, retirement might be a positive event for the retiree, but maybe not for the spouse, if they're not used to the spouse being at home all that much time. Believe me, I hear about that in therapy sessions sometimes. I'm having such stress because now my husband's around or my wife's around all the time. What's that? Okay, sure. So on the list we have death of a spouse, divorce, marital separation, jail term, death of a close family member, personal injury or illness, excuse me, marriage, being fired from work, marital problems, and retirement as the last one on the list. Next slide, please. Okay. The American Psychological Association does a survey every year of stress in America, and so this year's results were just published in the January edition of Monitor in Psychology. And it's interesting to see, even though this again might not be your exact list, but just what do other Americans typically say are stressing them out. 75% of Americans stated that money was a significant stressor. No surprise. Who here can say they're not stressed by money, even if you're in a relatively comfortable situation? Second to money as a stressor was work, then the economy, relationships, family responsibilities, family health problems, and personal health, with 53% of those surveyed saying that personal health was a major stressor. Money, work, and the economy, the top 3, have been the top 3 for the last 5 years. So I don't know if that's because of recession or if just typically these are the areas that most people are experiencing the greatest amount of stress in. Okay. On our next slide, according to the survey, the highest stress levels are experienced by these 3 groups. I'll read them. The first was adults 50 and older who serve as caregivers for a family member. I don't know if that surprises you or not, but that's very hard place to be when you're dealing with your own issues later in life and taking care of elderly parents or aunts and uncles. And more that's going to be the case as the generation, as our population ages and baby boomers age. The second category is people with obesity. Just by virtue of being overweight to the level of obesity is one of the most stressful populations to be in. And the third on the list is highest level of stress among people with depression. And you might say, is it chicken or the egg? Is it that you had stress and you got depressed, or you feel depressed and you have more stress? There's bound to be some vicious cycle with this, but regardless of what came first, that people who struggle with the mental health issue of depression are experiencing lots of stress that they're not handling well. On the next slide, you'll see that compared to the general population, caregivers report more stress. They have a higher level of stress, chronic stress, poor health and chronic illness, and they're less successful at making healthy changes. So everybody out there is trying. We're just doing the best we can, but sometimes our best doesn't get us the results we want. And we'll be talking about what helps you to get the results you want further in today's talk. How am I doing on time? Okay. However, caregivers, this is the good news at the bottom of the slide, caregivers who feel supported fare much better than caregivers who try to handle things on their own independently, handle all the responsibilities. So you may be thinking that, well, there's no way out of my caregiver responsibilities, but if you don't try to do it alone, and what we mean by support we'll be talking about further, but getting support, whether that means literally in the roles you have or just emotional support, can make it a whole lot more manageable. On the next slide, I want you to know that 1 in 10 Americans suffer from depression. So that's 10%. I mean, that's pretty high level. And I don't mean just sadness here and there, a day or two. Clinical depression is 2 weeks in a row at least of feeling depressed, as well as a whole other list of symptoms. And maybe 2 weeks doesn't sound very long, but that's all it takes to qualify for clinical depression. That duration, the amount of symptoms you have, and that it impairs your functioning. Any mental illness always comes with symptoms and impairment. 68% of adults are overweight or obese, so we're talking about majority of Americans, or at least adults, all agree that they're not doing enough to manage stress, just as the caregivers said, though they've tried more times than the general population in the past 5 years. It's harder to succeed at reaching health goals than reports of success in the general population. So though they try, it's much more frustrating to get the success. Okay. On the next slide, let's talk about why is something stressful to one person and not to another. How we perceive events and interpret information has a lot to do with it. And that depends on what your own past experiences are, what your own assumptions are about life and yourself, and your beliefs about life and people and ourselves. These are our filters. Think about it like your rose-colored glasses, or maybe your muddy-colored glasses, are filters to how we interpret anything that goes on at any given time. Impacts our mood. For example, as it says on here, if you said that I had a hard time finding a job, say you're in the position that you had a hard time finding a job before, so you believe that it'll be even harder to find one now. You can see how that thought and your past experience impacts what your attitude and your hopefulness is about the future of finding another job. A second example would be if you said, my husband didn't leave me the last time we had a bad argument, so he probably won't leave me again. So look at a past experience, what your impressions are about people, or at least that specific person, and how you feel about the situation. Cognitive behavior therapy, on our next slide, is a psychological approach to understanding stress in human behavior. And that's my theoretical orientation, and the way I approach therapy sessions with clients is the premise is that our thoughts create our feelings. And to change your thoughts, to change your feelings, you need to look at what your thoughts are. What are you telling yourself about the situation? And that has an impact on how you feel about the situation. And this cognitive behavioral therapy is an evidence-based practice or a treatment approach. So that means that there's been studies done that shows it makes a difference. It works to help people. It may not work quickly for some, it may work quicker for others, but it is a proven method. And the examples at the bottom of the slide here are, suppose you know that you feel afraid. Many times we're more in touch with what the feeling is, but not, I don't know why I feel this way. If you feel afraid, the questions would be, what are you telling yourself? If you feel overwhelmed, the question is, how are you thinking about your situation? What just happened? Even if it's not an immediate thing, it could be some childhood message, as I said, past experiences. So your next slide shows a column of feelings and thoughts. And depending on what you're more familiar with or comfortable with, you might want to start in the feelings column. If you're aware, I'm angry, but I'm not sure what this is about, then you can look to the thought side and see a ballpark idea of what could be behind that. Other folks I work with can tell me how they're thinking about it, but they don't recognize, oh, that relates to that feeling. And sometimes confusing what their feelings are. I have someone who said that they felt really guilty about having been abused as a child, and it turns out that we were able to reinterpret that as feeling ashamed. And that was a better interpretation of what her feelings were, feeling badly about it, as opposed to holding on to the belief that it was her fault and that she felt guilty because she did something wrong. And you feel bad because of this awful experience that happened. So I'll just read through a few of these on the slide towards the bottom there. For frustration, the thought would be life falls short of your expectations and you insist that things should be different. If you have a feeling of fear or anxiety, you believe you're in danger because something bad is about to happen. Fear is always about anticipating something coming in the future, whereas guilt or depression is feeling badly about something that already happened. And the last one on here is discouragement. You're convinced that your problems will never go away and you'll feel miserable forever. The role of biology is what I want to talk about next, because back to our question of why is something stressful for one person or another and not another, it's not just about how you interpret things, but there's also the physical or biological predispositions and what goes on in our body. Stress always triggers certain reactions in our body. Before I got up to the podium today, I started to feel my heart pounding and flutter, even though I knew I was prepared, but I recognized that's just what happens right before I start to speak, and then a few minutes into it, it goes away. And that's usually how it is if you believe that you can cope with what the situation is. If you're not convinced that you can cope, or you have intense stress or whatever the situation might be, then these physical symptoms can go to extreme and may be considered a panic attack. So it's like our alarm switch inside of us, the changes to our breathing, our heart rate, muscle tension, blood pressure, that's to be expected, but when it gets flipped for a minor reason or something that is not really justified to make you feel that afraid for that long, then that's an anxiety disorder, specifically like a panic attack. We're all wired to either have the flight or fight response, back from the caveman days. And the third one is freeze. Sometimes that's the response. But because of our ability to think about things, we can choose more ways than just flight or fright. Flight or fight or fright. Also, I want to say that some people are more sensitive than others to feeling stress physically in a certain part of your body. Maybe you know about yourself that you get headaches. I'm sorry I haven't been looking on this side of the room very much. Maybe you know about yourself that you get a backache, and that's your first sign. As opposed to psychological awareness that I'm feeling stress, your body's telling you first. And some folks, it may only be that they got the bodily symptoms and they're not even in tune with what's going on emotionally and mentally, and they come to therapy because they've had a lot of tests done to say, what is going on? I keep getting these headaches, I keep having GI problems, stomach aches, and no physical basis to that. And so then they wind up in my office where we talk about what might be stressing you. Even though nothing comes to mind, let's talk about how you're handling what's on your plate. Sometimes people minimize, like, well, yeah, I have all this to do, but I've always done that. well, that's stressful, and so maybe we can find some better ways for you to handle that. And chronic stress is a risk factor for disease. We know that there's a connection between stressful demands and what happens in our body and the biology. For example, suppression of the immune system, increased inflammation as a result of chronic stress, depression, anxiety, and maybe even adult onset diabetes. There's not a whole lot of research about that, but there's some early connections that it may influence diabetes. We know stress can make us sick. It can kill you. I don't mean, in the short-term stress, but chronic stress that's not handled well. But if you do handle it well, the good news is that it can bring out the best in you, and that's what we hope for. So now let's shift to talking about healthy stress management, and I'm going to bring out my northern upbringing so I can speak even faster than I am right now. So on the slide of healthy stress management, adaptive versus maladaptive coping, I won't go into detail with that, but the 3 A's of stress management, I like this because it's easy to remember. The 3 A's, what are my choices? Ballpark-wise, avoid, accept, or alter. And if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, we'll be making that available through the website, so know that that's going to be an option if you give us your email address and through the website. But, avoidance, you might think that, I didn't think I should be avoiding stress, but there are circumstances where avoidance is a very healthy coping strategy. You have an abusive husband or boyfriend. Get out of the relationship. Easier said than done for people in abusive relationships, but avoid harm, Sometimes avoiding seeing stressful relatives, even if they're not physically abusive, If you cannot have to go 5 times a year to see your mother-in-law, for example, even though I have had a wonderful mother-in-law. Yes, that therapist said. And in talking with others, whether it's a professional therapist or your friends, you begin to realize what things can I accept about this situation that I've been fighting or struggling against, and what things can I alter or change. And sometimes it takes the support and courage to sort that out and figure out what your choices are, so you don't feel stuck as if you don't have any choice. I'm in this job, I can't get another one, but I still have choices, for example. All right, then on our list are some broad categories that I could go on with lots of details, but I'm just going to hit the highlights of stress management areas. Relaxation. So we're not just talking about vacations, the nicest long relaxation, but what can you do during the course of your day to get relaxation, to get a break? I was going to have you all do 3 deep breaths. So at home, please go home and do 3 deep breaths where you put your hand on your abdomen and breathe in, and even if you have to exaggerate and blow out, just 3 deep breaths can be the signal to your body to say, calm down, take a minute, it's going to be okay, even if those thoughts aren't coinciding with it. But that's the message to your body, that you may not even realize how tight and tense you were till you took those 3 deep breaths. Exercise is another known antidepressant and stress management strategy. Not only biologically does it have good effects for us, for our mood, but it's getting your energy out. It's getting you to perhaps distract from what your worry thoughts are. If you've heard of people who say they run and they're just not thinking about anything. If you can enjoy the moment of exercising. If exercise is not something you enjoy, we have some strategies for that too, how to help you get to that point. But that's a stress management strategy. The last one on the slide is diversions. What I mean by diversions are hobbies, leisure activities, taking your mind off what the stressful situation is or the responsibilities by doing something else that's pleasurable, enjoyable. So we had the relaxing music playing before you came in the room. Even if you only get a few minutes of that, there's research that shows if you spend 2 minutes looking at a beautiful nature scene out your window or on your laptop screensaver, that will lower stress hormones in your body. So don't discount the small stuff, even though you know that you still have your problem when you get back to it, but you need those breaks in between. You need the small help and the big help. Some other ideas for stress management: assertiveness, stating what you need, saying no more often if you have a problem with saying no. And that can be an area that's really hard for people because of what their old messages are about. I'm being rude if I say no, or they're not going to like me if I say no. We can work through that, you know. I'm not talking about making a total personality change, but just picking and choosing, setting limits and setting boundaries more often so you don't have such a full plate and feel like you don't have control. Problem solving. There's such a thing as productive worry and unproductive worry. So your problem solving is when you're thinking about the thoughts, which usually are at bedtime, aren't they? The worst time to be having your anxious thoughts. But that's because when we finally stop the busyness, lay down, and want to go to sleep, the mind turns on, right? So productive worry at that time of day or any time is where you consider what's bothering you, but it leads you to a point where you have a solution. You can say, I'm going to do this about it, or I'm going to accept this, or I'm going to wait till tomorrow and talk about this to somebody. I know an action I can take. Unproductive worry is where it's like this endless loop where you're just spiraling down, feeling even worse about it because you've thrown in some other things. You're worried about this, oh, this means this means this. And so if you get to that point, you can't see your way out of that. That's when it's helpful to talk to someone else and to just say, I need to stop and put an end to that, even if you didn't figure anything out, and be able to just use another skill like distracting with something totally different. Seeking support and time management are two more strategies listed on this slide. Seeking support, by that I mean a family member that you can talk to and confide in, a friend, strangers that just have a common goal with you. So whether you join Weight Watchers or you join exercise class, you have that commonality and you feel like you're not in this alone. Internet is a real source of support too, because there's blogs, there's support groups on the internet, there's support groups face-to-face, which I recommend also, like through your mental health association. And finally, remember that getting professional help is also support for you too. And whatever stigma or barriers you have about that, maybe something you need to work through first. And the last thing is time management. That could be a whole nother talk in itself, time management as a way to handle your stress. So I'm going to just leave it at that, but know that if you find that your excuse is, I don't have enough time to exercise, then we're talking about time management and what your beliefs are about how important is that goal. Okay, I'm going to breeze through because I want to be sure we have at least 5 minutes for questions. So the rest of the talk today is what I called 5 steps of the next slide, 5 steps to a better you. And these 5 steps aren't written down somewhere in any source. I kind of pulled a lot of what I read and what I know together to make it, if you have it as steps, it'd be easier to remember it. So the first is awareness. Awareness that you have a bad habit. And secondly, and what is this bad habit about? So some examples of bad habits. We don't need help thinking of what our bad habits are. You might have something that's really bad and to the extreme of addiction, and that's a whole nother talk too. Or you might have something that is only stressful to you and not other people. Sometimes a bad habit is you think it's fine, but other people are complaining about it. And what is this about? It's about looking at what your precipitating thoughts and feelings are. You're anxious about, why do you smoke so much, chain smoker? Is it because you're doing that to manage your anxiety or other reasons? What's behind yelling at your kids so much? Is it because you feel disrespected and at your wit's end, or feeling out of control? So if you can get some insight about that, it increases your level of awareness as a first step to make some changes with bad habits. Next slide, just want to say that there's habits of commission and omission. Commission are the things that you're doing that you want to change. Omission is things that you're not doing but you want to start doing, like flossing, drinking enough water, exercising, getting monthly self-exams. Step 2, so first we said awareness. Second step is motivation. Building your case and making a list of pros and cons. So you're aware you want to change something, but why? Why bother? That's the big question. What's your motivation? So literally writing down what your pros and cons are. And here's an example I gave if your goal was to exercise more. Ideally, you'll have more on your pros list than your cons list, but it's not always about the number of items, it's the weight you give it. Like, well, I might have these 2 things, but that's a real big barrier. And so go back to the drawing board about what can I do to eliminate the barriers if you really want to start to make progress. And then the next few slides, I make reference to something called the stages of change. Prochaska is the author who wrote these stages of change. And this is important because it's a critical step in lasting behavior change is readiness. So instead of feeling bad that why can't I make this change, I'm not doing what I need to be doing, it may be that you're not at the action stage. The changes here are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and termination. So let's flip through these quickly and you'll see a gist of each one. Pre-contemplation is not even thinking about making a change, fleeting thoughts of changing with lots of reasons not to change, and let's see, convinced it's not worth the effort. Next is contemplation stage, some dissatisfaction. You're thinking about changing, but your cons outweigh the pros. What can you do to remove barriers to change? Next is preparation stage, seriously contemplating a change, but you may have taken some action already and you're making a plan. So you're well on your way in the right direction. And with any one of these stages, when someone comes to therapy, for example, it's not about me trying to convince the person, you need to do this. It might be more about, well, it doesn't sound like you're really ready to make changes yet. How important is that to you? How important is it to the other? And this is called motivational interviewing, which is another evidence-based practice, so that you don't get mad. Hopefully you're not getting mad at the person or they're getting mad at themselves for not making these changes, but look at what's the motivation and what do you need to do to move to the next step? Do you even want to move to the next level? So the action stage is where you're taking the necessary steps to change, you're following your plan. Maintenance is where you're continuing in action long enough for it to become your new habit. There's no magic number, though you may have heard 21 days and you've got a new habit. I don't think there's any specific power to 21 days. So keep going, maybe 6 months before you're doing something that it feels so comfortable, it's your new healthy habit. But there's no set amount of time. And the termination stage is where you said you don't really have to consciously be aware of trying to do the new behavior because it's part of who you are. Your change is permanent. So step 3, remember 1 was awareness, 2 is motivation, 3 is setting a specific goal. Don't be vague, such as a goal of, I want to be more organized. The more specific and measurable you can be, then you can see your success. You can give yourself credit for the success. So a better way to word it would be, I'll spend 15 minutes a day decluttering part of one room. Make it manageable. Okay. And it'll help you succeed while I get the size. Is that your goal? Step 4 is tip the odds in your favor. So put in place some factors that promote your success. And I think this is really the stuff that leads from action plan to maintenance plan. Because you're going to, as I'll say, the next step, I'm getting ahead of myself, is that expect there'll be slip-ups. But if you work these, you're going to recover from those slip-ups. So some ideas here are make environmental changes like avoidance and pairing. What I mean by pairing is, there was a time where I was trying to get myself to floss more. I admit I am not a regular flosser. But what I did was I had to put the floss right by my toothbrush. And it was in the bathroom, but it was out of sight, out of mind, so it was right by my toothbrush. I said, when I brush my teeth, I'll be grabbing that floss too. Well, that pairing example didn't work so great for me for long term, but it did work for a little while. Other pairing things would be, I get myself to exercise, which I really do enjoy, by telling myself that I'll only read my new magazine when I get on the treadmill. So I get the magazine, it sits there, and I'm enjoying reading the magazine, so it gets me to walk on the treadmill and read at the same time. So if you can associate some things to make these environmental changes. Rewards and incentives, don't discount how powerful that can be. We know that intermittent reinforcement works, which means you don't have to get a reward every time to keep trying. So if you're rewarded some of the time, that's going to help you. And by reward, plan it ahead. Think about, like, I'm thinking already, I thought already what my reward's going to be for finishing this talk today. And so, believe me, I needed to establish that weeks ago. So, and incentives, I started to get into running 5K races for something as simple as you get to collect t-shirts. You get a t-shirt at the end of the race. Did it seem like all that effort was worth a t-shirt? It did to me. So you never know what is going to be rewarding for you. It's unique. Think about those things and try to pair it up as your weekly, if not daily, reward for making it through the day and doing pretty well. Accountability is another strategy to yourself and to others. Telling people what your goal is, that's a known way to help you stick with your plan, not a guarantee. And accountability to yourself could be where you write your goal down and you see it every day. If you keep a journal, that might help you. Chart your progress. Again, if you're visual and you can see that it's one messed up day doesn't mean all's lost, because look at all the days beforehand, if you've been charting that you've been doing well, that you should give yourself credit for. Rally support is on the list, affirmations, visualizations, and the last one is, when possible, go with your grain, not against it. What I mean by that is, say you're a morning person or you're not a morning person, it's going to be a harder time to try to get yourself to exercise at 6 a.m. if you're not typically a morning person. It's doable, but why fight yourself, you know? Another would be is if you're a frugal person, it might help you that you spent $300 on the gym membership, because now you're not going to waste that money. You paid it, you're going to go. Or the other way around, that maybe you don't want to spend money on gym membership, so do the things that eliminate money as your barrier. Do the free things that count as towards exercise. If you're a social person, do things with the like-minded folks and walk with a friend as opposed to just thinking you and your dog are going to get out there alone. Or if you're a visual person, have the clues and the cues of your picture of you at a point in your life where you were doing well, where you reached your goal, and have that to remind yourself that you can do that again. I like to put this picture in just so that you can see your potential, assert your power and be the king of the jungle, okay? Just find your inner lion. And finally, we're on the last step 5, plan ahead for slip-ups. I call this damage control. So you slipped up, it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean all is lost. Use your self-talk and support yourself and get support from others who encourage you to pick up where you left off. See that all is not lost. Believe this is a temporary setback, even if it's been a couple of days or weeks since you've been, I'm using the gym analogy, but forgive yourself, reframe what this means, and try to understand what happened. Well, what was it? I did get a cold, and so it was hard to do this or that. Next slide is a quote I think that might be helpful. The only difference between people who reach their goals and those who don't is that those who succeed didn't give up. Next, I have another cute picture that just speaks to me. Does the smiling ball know something that we don't? Does she have hope when others don't? I don't know. I just like the picture. And finally, embracing a positive attitude. This takes practice and conscious effort. I'm not going to go into pessimists and optimists, but really what we're working towards is trying to develop some more optimism wherever you are on that continuum. And that means deciding that it's worth it to try to look at the bright side, to feel more grateful. We know that that has an effect on living longer even. We get what we expect, so watch what your words are. Look for the silver lining and use a sense of humor. I don't have that on here, but what you can't see on the slide is inspire yourself and others. If you're familiar with what the Serenity Prayer says, if not, look that up. That's real helpful for embracing a positive attitude. And something called I think I coined it, the at least coping skill. So no matter what's going on, say, we've got this lousy weather today, at least it's not snow and ice. So if you can say, what's the at least I can look at? All these things have happened this year. At least I'm still alive and breathing, and having a sense of humor can get you through some tough times. Next slide. Some more ideas. Put your stressful experience into context. Is it really that big of a deal? Remember your track record. Did things usually work out, but in the moment it's hard to remember that? Things are never as bad as you think they are at first. That's true for me. I don't know how many other people believe that. And again, watch your words. So we're to the end here with just 2 more pictures. This is hard to see, but it says positive attitude, it changes everything. The glass half full instead of half empty. And the last slide is this butterfly, a nature scene which you can stare at for 2 minutes. No, and the words underneath say there are only, oh gosh, I don't have my glasses. There are only 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And that was Albert Einstein. All right, can I take any questions? And know that I'll be sticking around if someone has any questions after you have to leave. So, all right. I wish everyone well. Thank you for coming today.